everyone, and a massive welcome to what was nearly not a very exciting episode here on Infosec.live. Two of us in the room today have had some broadband issues, so keep your fingers crossed. But we're going live for Selling Cyber, where Greg van der Gaast helps explore how vendors can impress additional value from their offerings in a way that can drive real change to the security landscape. In fact, episode 1 in the series stirred up some great engagement and prompted Rapid7 to reach out to us here at Infosec.live. So today, we're chatting with Rapid7's EMEA regional CTO, Jason Hart, and their senior sales engineer, David Higgs, about how Rapid7 are raising the bar for outcome-based selling. They're going to chat a bit about how Rapid7 are leveraging outcome-based selling in customer engagements and how their tooling can be used to highlight root issues pointing to cultural behaviours. For those that haven't tuned in before, my name's Simon Instead, and by sharing stories and best practice over the last few months, it's now led to us having 4,000 subscribers as of today and 8,000 hours of our content being watched on YouTube by all of you amazing subscribers. So a huge thank you for your engagement. And if you'd like to support the wider Infosec Live community, or indeed buy me a cheeky decaf coffee, we do have a few ways you can show your appreciation. I just slopped it all over the floor while I did that as well. First up, the ability to purchase super stickers in the chat if you'd like your question bumped up to the top, and 3 tiers of membership allowing you to show your support in any way that you can. But whether you join or not, being here and engaging with our content is what really matters. So if you've got a question, please do drop it in the chat. After all, it is you, our audience, who make these so special. So let's bring Greg on before we bring David and Jason on and just frame what we're going to be chatting about today. So Greg, can you hear me firstly? Is this working?
I can hear you. You've spoken for a full minute quite crisply because it was not looking very promising before.
It wasn't. It really wasn't. So I've given a bit of background. Do you want to just give your two pence worth about what we're going to be digging into today with the guys?
Well, I'm curious to hear, because David mentioned he wanted to talk about this, about what actually made them get in touch. I think we mentioned him because he actually had some sales insights as well that he shared when we started talking about episode 1, I think. I think it's quite interesting how, and this is a trend that's actually been brought to my attention this week, a lot of companies are using, CISOs, CIOs, CTOs that are actually public facing, they're customer facing. So I think it's really, really interesting to talk to Jason about that. Obviously, hear a little bit more about what they both do at Rapid7, how that works within the company, what their interactions are with customers, how they try to drive value. Just really give the floor to them on that stuff. And I'd be quite curious as a CISO myself, what the kind of extra value that I want out of a tool, how do they, manage my expectations, and how can I get vendors to be more helpful to me, and just a bunch of random stuff, really.
Awesome. Let's get the random stuff started. Let's bring them on. How's your Starlink, Jason?
Simon, I'm getting there, so I'm going to need some air cover from everyone here this evening, okay?
It's brilliant. It's working absolutely fine. We can hear you now. Do you want to, hey, David, as well, by the way, do you want to just take a couple of minutes both, starting off with you, Jason, just giving a bit about your background and what you do at Rapid7, if that's okay?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Lovely joining you all this evening. Jason Hart, CTO for Rapid7 for the EMEA region. Essentially been in cybersecurity my whole life. Founded one of the European first ethical hacking companies when I was 18, a company called White Hat. And then from there, I founded one of the world's first cloud-based authentication platforms. So been in cyber my whole life, from a very technical background all the way through to CEO, founder, running engineering teams, development teams, but everything in the cybersecurity domain.
Awesome. And can I ask why you're not working for yourself anymore? Is it, I know it's a personal question. I've got my own answers for that, but what's your answer for that, Jason?
No, great question. And it's at least a question I get asked twice, if not 3 times a week. I love what I do.
I love being original.
Yeah, no. To be really honest, I love understanding what's going on within customers because, over the years, there's an evolution of different challenges. And, as I'm getting old and more grey, Simon, you learn more, you mature more. And ultimately, I like to think I can give more back. And for me, that's what it's about.
Awesome. Thank you very much. David, tell us a bit about yourself and where you've come from. Sounds like a chat show, that. It's not.
Yeah, so I'm a senior security solutions engineer, so a sales engineer. My region is actually Eastern Europe and Italy. So that's kind of the area that I cover. But I do pitch in with the UK team as well. But yeah, I've kind of been I've been with Rapid7 over a year now. But prior to that, I was with a telecoms company. So I started off doing telecoms, networking, worked on phone systems, branched over into networks, then started dabbling in security and kind of branched out from there. And I was fortunate enough to kind of get quite involved with a lot of like governance side of stuff with my previous company. And yeah, that's kind of led me down the path of being in sales engineering and working for Rapid7 now.
Thanks, David. And for those who are watching who don't really know what a senior sales engineer does, my definition is they try and deliver on the promises made by the sales team. Is that about right? Or
They're cleaners.
they are. I wasn't going to put it that bluntly.
Not all of them. Yeah, I'd like to think there's some really amazing salespeople out there. We're actually, but no, joking. But actually, for me, a salesperson and an SE, right relationship, right combination can actually provide an immense and make a lot of changes in organizations.
And add an awful lot of value as well, I would say, if you've got the right team
100%.
together. I'm going to do what I find it very hard to do, which is shut up and let Greg host a few questions, because he is the expert here. I'm just the slightly old haggard face in the corner. So, Greg, over to you, my friend.
No, I think the SE, it's actually something we talked about on Tuesday. And one of my observations, you sometimes have, some sales pitches are not so great. Some are really, really good. And sometimes you have the sales presentation will quite often lead, okay, this is the problem space, this is our product, this is what it does for you. And then there's the sales engineering demo. And that can make or absolutely, you can have a tremendous sales pitch and then the sales engineer just falls completely flat. It's just a screen, ticking buttons, very disconnected. So my compliment to David is he's definitely more personable than some of the sales engineers I've dealt with. And I think I want to go back to, you'd requested opening with this, David, a few minutes ago when we were still off air. How did we get started? Because I know that we mentioned, you had actually said some stuff on LinkedIn that...
Yeah, so I remember watching the first episode, and a lot of the stuff that you were kind of hitting on. I got some notes here, like lack of root cause analysis during the sales process, during with implementations of security tooling. And I was listening to everything. I was going, well, actually, like at Rapid7, we're doing like loads of that. Like Jason's actually got a big educational piece that he's running, both externally to customers and internally to our sales team around operationalizing cybersecurity. So kind of like what you were hitting on in the first episode, going, okay, like CVEs, vulnerabilities in your environment, incidents, like these are kind of like the surface manifestations of, deeper issues. And actually, we're talking now to our sales teams and saying, look, our tools will surface these issues, but most importantly, they'll, if you've got the right mindset, allow you to start diving deeper and asking more kind of pertinent questions about the business itself and the underlying processes that those tools fit into. So yeah, that's kind of I was like talking to the screen almost, going like, we're doing that, we're doing that.
It's nice. I was actually thinking about like a similar concept today. Like we talk a lot in security. I've lost count of how many presentations I've seen on attribution, attack attribution. Oh, we're gonna go get the bad guys over there and stop them. And to me, it seems like such a pipe dream and detached from the kind of business and technical reality and all the legal problems, whatever. And I was like, well, what about attribution of where my problems are coming from? Like I want a vulnerability scanning tool that tells me engineering keeps causing this issue 4 times a week and it's costing us that time. Marketing is causing us this. IT operations is causing us that. So I can attribute where all the security work is coming from and hold those departments accountable. That's the kind of stuff that I'd really like to see. And I think I've not used Rapid7 in about 10 years, probably more than that. So I don't know where the product is now. But I think even if the product was never designed to do that, it is still something I think a more savvy CISO is going to be using it for. And it's definitely a narrative that the salespeople should be capitalizing on. It's not just that, the technical function of the tool. It's what you can do with it to improve, like you said, your business processes and the root causes there. I'm quite curious how, what are your interactions with clients? And maybe this is more on Jason's side at a high level, the customer needs, and some of these the customers may realize that, hey, this is what we want. And some of it is just kind of thinking out of the box of, hey, like a C-level security person might want this kind of reporting, or might want to be able to calculate, remediation costs around vulnerabilities and use that to influence the business. Or how do you discover that, capture that, maybe come up with it on your own, put it in the product? Does that happen at all?
Yes to all of that, Greg, but maybe I'll just step back, okay? Very fortunate to kind of engage with organizations at all levels around the globe, okay, on a daily basis, some of the largest organizations in the world. Rapid7 have over 10,000 customers globally and growing continually. And for me, if I look at the industry, going back to kind of the brief introduction, if I go back 25 years ago, the days of modems, to try and convince an organization to implement a firewall was really hard. And now we come 25 years forward, the ability to get sign off for an element of budget for a component or an element of cybersecurity becomes far easier. And I think we've gone, in some sense, too far to the right. And let me explain what I mean by this. What I'm seeing around the world at the moment, and you might find this quite interesting from a vendor saying what I'm about to say, is there's copious amounts of technology out there that can be implemented, okay? Now, my frustration is, and my challenge to the world is, and I challenge customers is that technology configured appropriately, point number one, but more importantly, are your business requirements aligned to that technology, underpinned by the process? So what we kind of get into really quickly is this, what I call a current operating model. What is your current operating model around cybersecurity? So let's take vulnerability management as an example. So if we've got anyone online here now who are struggling with vulnerability management, every month they present the same report with a 20% increase on the same freaking vulnerabilities to the same people, and they're not getting anywhere. And ultimately, the security team are doing what they should be doing, but there's a fundamental breakdown in alignment between business functions, accountability, and ownership. So what we're doing at Rapid7 is utilizing the technology, applying the business requirements, and by presenting the right information in the appropriate way, you can clearly show that there's a breakdown in business process between business functions without getting into the technicalities, and it becomes a business issue.
You sound a lot like me, don't you think, Simon? How many times
I was nodding along, thinking, how am I going to turn this around and say, don't you think vendors' narrative is part of the problem of where we are in the industry? And Jason's already said that. So,
well, this is I love what you're. This is actually, we've not prepared this, people. I'm really, really surprised, because this is the stuff that I'm usually talking about. And one of the analogies I often give is it's like an assembly line in the car factory. Like you expect there to be, the security team in some ways is kind of the quality assurance at the end, because I look at security as a quality function. Like a vulnerability is essentially a defect, whether it be architecture, process, you've not allowed patching to happen, or the code is deficient causing a vulnerability, whatever. And it's the security person is like the QA person at the end of the line, making sure that everything was assembled properly on the 100 stations. Anywhere else, you would go, ooh, all the steering wheels are on crooked. Let's go over there and make sure that we adjust the business process so the steering wheels are on properly. Maybe we need to chalk the wheels while we do it, whatever that is, and fix that business process. In security, we're like, oh, all the steering wheels are crooked. Let's hire 10,000 more QA people to then reposition all the steering wheels. And it sounds like you're trying to get people to wake up. I think a lot of what we do in security, shut up, sorry, I'm telling myself to shut up, because security is something you can't really see, there's a lack of accountability for it. So we kind of get away with doing things really inefficiently because people don't understand, and the hooded hackers and the green stuff on the screen. But there's actually way more parallels to things like manufacturing and really mature industries than people realize. So it's very interesting that you've reached that point.
So, a couple of things, and then, I can chat like most for yourself and Simon. I'm keen to give David a bit of airtime here. But, over the last week, a very large global organization, a very significant, a great customer to Rapid7 as well. So I'm in with their board, I'm in with their CISO and the broader security team across the globe. And, there's lots of conversations around, ROI on the technology, etc. So kind of getting to the conversation. And the simple thing I say is, right, could you go and print out a trend analysis, please, for the last 12 months? And I tend to see 3 common trends. 90% of the time, I just see a flat line increasing up. Straight away, that tells me lack of process, lack of alignment, lack of scope. The second diagram I see is spikiness, an element of process, an element of control, but uncontrolled. It's not repeatable and scalable. And then the second one, which is basically 10% of organizations, it gradually, kind of reduces down over a period of time, a little spike, and then carries on, which shows me that actually security processes is built into the business process. And straight away, the simplest way of overcoming this is understanding the scope. So what we're seeing is people spraying cybersecurity everywhere within an organization. But what if we were to break that organization down by business function? So I call it the, can I swear or not? The OPU moment. So it's really simple. As an organization, as a CISO, as a board, as stakeholders in that organization, if you were to get a phone call from Rapid7 tomorrow to say, unfortunately, we're sorry to tell you, you've been compromised, what business function would you go, oh shit? And ask that question. Anyone on here today, if you're a salesperson, ask that during a sales engagement. Most organizations, or even CISOs, unfortunately, sorry CISOs if you're joining us, but they find that very hard to answer. Once you know that becomes your immediate scope. Focus on that scope, okay? And then focus on the critical and high vulnerabilities. And over time, you can start propagating down. Why I'm saying this, Greg, this is all like, out of the box functionality within Rapid7, of course, but it's such a pragmatic way of breaking, this barrier to solving some very basic problems, which are not technology, it's the operating model and the lines of communication or lines of translation between different parts of the organization. I'll stop there.
Can I just jump in, because I want to make sure the audience keep engaged. And Dominic's put a comment in there that I want to pass to you, Jason, before we move on to David. And he said, if you're reporting the same issues month on month, but seeing a 20% growth in vulnerabilities, how can you change the discussion with senior managers? I mean, I think this is the biggest frustration for folks out there at the moment. Most people are seeing this going wrong, but no one knows how to get it addressed.
Yeah, it's really simple. First of all, we need to stop showing them the technical vulnerability report, and because they don't understand it. What we need to actually show is we need to explain the cost of that operating model. The operational cost within the organization is immense. Okay, so it's basically your internal cost between IT and security is going to continue going up. You're never going to play catch up. So your exposure is becoming greater and greater. So how to present this is, as an organization, we have a fundamental problem here. In order to overcome this problem, we either double down on doubling the size of the IT function, increase automation on patching, etc., or we break it down. As a business, if a particular business function was compromised, what would the impact be? And you focus on that particular business function only. And then over time, you reduce it down. Now, what I also do at the same time is far up in the organization, I've come up with a concept of protection level agreements. So protection level agreement is basically, it's like an SLA, but we call it protection because it aligns to security. So as high up in the organization, you say, right, in a particular critical business function, if there is a critical vulnerability, when do you want that resolved? They tell you. So basically, they're providing a KPI. We call it a protection level agreement. So what you do now, you establish protection level agreements in certain parts of the organization and functions, and you align a protection level agreement. What you do then, every month, you present back to the business, not the vulnerabilities, to say, that business function, you wanted a critical vulnerability resolved within a certain period of time. Actually, the mean time to remediation is way out of what we agreed as a business. So the impact to the organization is significant. Suddenly you get a change of mind and a mind shift immediately happening, because you're not talking bits and bytes vulnerabilities, you're talking in a language that the business understands.
That makes absolute sense. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say this, Greg, to make you upset, but a bit like what Greg said, but much more eloquently put, Jason.
Thanks. No, but I think you raised you've a lot of was in your answer. I think about 80% of it was the next question I was going to ask. But I think you've raised another one, because I absolutely agree with you that it's you have to go look at the business process and fix that. And a lot of people are really frustrated. It's like, we're just cleaning up vulnerability, picking up vulnerabilities, cleaning them up every month, or just frustrated that we're seeing the same ones over and over again, or we're seeing the ones that we finally got cleaned up last month, they're back. And a lot of people are frustrated on how to make that progress. And I think, unfortunately, there's a lack of there's a skill set that's lacking in information security, especially at like a senior strategic level. And we were commenting on this earlier this week. There seems to be a trend now where everyone's a CISO.
I would maybe kind of take that and say, do you think that there's a communication gap between CISOs and the other execs?
Yeah.
Or whoever is in charge of security within the organization. The reason I say this, shameless plug, if that's okay, Simon, but I do.
What you're here for, David? It's what you're here for. Carry on.
I do have an upcoming webinar. We haven't got a date yet, but it's going to be in May. The title I've called it is "CISOs are from Mars, CEOs are from Venus."
I like it.
Right.
Brilliant.
And basically, I use. I don't know if you're familiar with FAIR. Risk management, but
I've had the guy on the show, actually, Jack Jones, isn't it? Is it Jack?
Yeah, it's straight out of his book. That's the inspiration for it. I talk you through FAIR as kind of introduce the concept of it, but then I also layer in like our tooling as well. But the idea behind it is that actually we're also bridging that communication gap, right? Because the reason we have these continual vulnerabilities within the infrastructure, and that we're not focusing on the process, is because we've not found a way to translate that issue that is in the process into a financial issue for the business.
I agree with that. I think that I was probably being you were less harsh than I was. Let's put it that way. But I think that there is that gap. But it's I've had that gap. You don't always know everything. You never know everything you need to know. You learn it as you go. And I see this big kind of gap where CISOs are considered very, very technical. I've been denied so many roles because they were confused that I was business savvy. And that ruled me out for a CISO role because they just expect it to be. And I'm like, well, what is your corporate business strategy? Like, we need to make customers more comfortable with getting us information so we can improve your marketing and get better sales. And they're like, well, no, we want you to secure our point of sale devices. It's like, well, that's not a CISO's job. And there's definitely like a lack of ability to speak in business terms, of building relationships, of influencing, of looking at the big picture. A lot of CISOs, I'm going to say, don't even think about the business process. They still see themselves very much as an IT function. They're not trying to address all the business processes that the IT is supporting. So they're just not going far enough. And now you guys are definitely providing the tools to help. And I almost feel like, is there almost I think there should be a moral obligation on behalf of CISOs to do that a little bit better. But is there maybe like a moral obligation for vendors to try to also educate and facilitate that communication, which you guys seem to be doing a little bit. But I feel like just giving those insights beyond just the technology, the insights, that shared wisdom around it would be really valuable to people.
Yeah, I think, Greg, from Rapid7's perspective, over the past 12 or so months, we do a significant amount of knowledge share with CISOs. There isn't a week that goes by where I'm either hosting or my colleagues around the globe are hosting CISOs on really the concept of operating models. So the biggest challenge I see with CISOs, and I've got to be careful how I position this because I have so many friends of CISOs and work on a daily basis with CISOs around the world, is ultimately a lot of CISOs now, to your point, are coming from a particular domain in cybersecurity, okay, and they've come up for a particular track. So my first challenge with the whole industry, generally, I think I was the youngest ever CIS back in 1998, but you were, there was 12 domains and you became a master of all those. We hammer times forward, in today's you can become, you're tracked in one particular domain potentially. So what you're seeing is CISOs coming into a CISO role, and their knowledge and their ability to take an organization on a journey isn't there. So for me, in today's world, the ideal CISO would be a chief operating officer, because they know how to enable transformation across the organization. They know how to take an organization on a journey. Now, you're saying, well, the chief operating officer doesn't necessarily have the security skills, but you put practitioners around them to support that and feed in, and then he can take the wider organization on a journey. So for me, and in a lot of the workshops I run, is literally that's the training I'm doing. So it's how to create a target operating model, how to translate our industry into a way that the business understands. And the analogy I use, and I'll hand across to someone else, is if I go into a board meeting tomorrow, I've done a lot of private equity work in my life, so spend a lot of time in boardrooms. If I start talking about P&L and EBIT, okay, and I also say to a board that the EBIT dial, within your organization is going to be negative in a quarter's time, that board, those stakeholders would understand what levers to adjust to make that organization more profitable or EBITDA positive. That's what we need to do with cybersecurity. We need to, my connection dropped? Yeah, no, Starlink dropped there. So we need to, again, present, as a CISO needs to present those appropriate levers so the board can actually make that informed decision. Yeah. Because ultimately, as our industry becomes even more complicated, even more risks and vulnerabilities, which will happen, you cannot mitigate every single risk. So you've got to have the contextual elements of the risks and threats relative to your organization. And again, that's what we do at Rapid7.
Yeah, you have to understand the business. Even the most technical, a SOC analyst has to know what that system is that he's seeing being attacked to understand its value. I want to pick up on a comment by William. He said, "This is the difficulty I'm finding when looking for a job in cyber with a business information systems degree. Quote, you're not as technical as we want, even though you know what we're talking about." And I find this really frustrating. And I'm a car fanatic, so all my analogies are car analogies. Years ago, when I wrote my book, I did this analogy of, imagine you're on the street and you're standing in front of a car factory and you have a building on your right, and to the left is a parking lot where they've put the finished car. So they go through all these, this assembly line, you have this perfect, beautiful car, and then they push it out into the parking lot to be sold, but they push it from the third floor. And next thing you know, it's like, well, it's all mangled. They push it to a corner, they build a workshop around it. And you got heaps of people figuring out, well, what's wrong with it? How do we fix it? Which parts do we need? What order do we disassemble it? How do we quality manage because we can't fix everything? How do we work together? What's our basic standards? Get some auditors in, get some consultants to help us, get some auditors to make sure we're doing it properly. And this massive ecosystem. And we have this massive cybersecurity skills gap because you need tens of thousands of these people because there's another car falling and crashing down every 30 seconds. And then I'll go hire a bunch of, former salespeople and teachers and air stewardess and a business owner. And they'll stand there at the edge of this parking garage feeling really intimidated that they don't know how to do any of this. And then they'll ask me a really stupid question. they'll say, why are we dropping the cars from the 3rd floor? And because they're not IT people, they have some vague, they tend to be more familiar with business. They tend to be better. They're from industries where you tend to communicate with people. They're able to go into the factory and says, guys, this doesn't make sense. This is costing us a bundle. Why don't we just make them come down here and we'll have 1/10 the work to do? And they're actually able to communicate that. And from a strategic improving the business process, that was a much, much more productive team than any team of like 6-figure techies.
I totally agree, Greg. And, another analogy would be, business needs relative to the persona. So what is the audience in the organization, and present the information in a way that it's meaningful and understandable for them to make informed decisions.
I find it frustrating that there's still a lot of businesses, a lot of HR directors, we even had an episode about like, what the hell is what is a CISO? Because most people define that as, a technical role. The job descriptions are terrible. And if you're not a techie, there's probably a majority of CISO roles out there. Now, keep in mind, this includes, companies with a few hundred staff, not big corporations. But a lot of companies that have the title, they're basically looking for someone technical. They're not looking for any real, it'll say business, this and that, but they just want you to write a policy, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, so I expect David to be able to pick up on this. So
yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think it does vary, that the person who holds that role. And I say the person who holds that role because, like you say, in smaller businesses, it's not necessarily a dedicated role. It's it's aligned with someone who's already in the business that's got a full-time job doing something else. And I've seen all different types. You've got the technical person who's been the most technical person in the business that's kind of got that role. I've also seen the likes of people involved with service delivery, but like a director level or like a COO that's kind of got that dual role as well. So in my experience, you've got completely different ends of the spectrum. But I think it is, starting to change with quite a lot of businesses, but especially larger ones. Like, in fact, only this week, I was talking with potential customers, and they're kind of building themselves a SOC. And the guy that was in charge, he straight away held his hands up and said, "I'm not technical." He was more interested in those strategic things, how it was going to improve the business functions. And actually, like we had a great conversation. We had the technical guys in the room as well to kind of, make sure that the technology was right. And with Rapid7, we're really fortunate to have like quite a broad technology stack. So we are able to take customers on that journey. And in fact, the words they used were they're looking for a technology partner, which I really like, because it kind of they were looking for a partner to go on a journey with. So they recognize that they're not going to be secure overnight. They recognize that there is this maturity journey to go through, and it's having a look at our portfolio and saying, okay, where do we start? What's going to get us like that good baseline, and start to build from there. But yeah, I certainly feel that things are starting to change with more strategic, business orientated individuals heading up the role.
But equally, if I just jump in quickly, it's going off on a tangent a little bit, but I'm going back to what you said about using people who've got kind of existing roles to do the job. And the recent SEC guidelines in the US talking about having the CISO at board level or someone at board level with that knowledge. I mean, I've had a report of about 7 firms over the last few weeks who've just got someone to sit Network Plus who's originally on the board. And that's not the kind of change we're looking for, is it? That was my only comment.
Well, I think I got 2 things. First of all, I just want to go back to William's great question about a business degree. Okay. For me on a CV, I would be putting, and William, this is to yourself, go and, if you most probably would have studied in your degree, business processes. The key thing within cybersecurity, and what is the glue to cybersecurity, is making cybersecurity part of the business process. So in your CV, put skill set, understanding cybersecurity business processes. So again, you don't need to understand the technical detail, but add that to your CV, go and read a few books. And honestly, if you need help, myself or other people in Rapid7, or I'm sure Simon and Greg can support you. But there's a big gap in people like you understanding business skills and making cybersecurity processes repeatable and scalable. So
I think he's reaffirmed that by his follow-up comment there. I don't know if you saw that come in, Jason. He loves his degree, but he doesn't want to be locked away staring at a screen. Wants to be quiet. Yeah, perfect.
Don't need to be.
Yeah.
So that was the just wanted to kind of close that loop for William there and give something back to him there. What was the other question you were saying, Simon?
I was just rambling on about companies getting people to sit Net Plus to get away from the SEC guidelines. Yeah.
So in fact, I'm doing a lot of advisory of NED on board. So that's the board, the association for NEDs, non-exec board members, and doing a lot of training with a lot of their board members at the moment. And yes, they don't need to understand the technicalities, but what they do need to understand, and going back to Greg and even David's point earlier on, is how can they challenge an organization? Okay, so board members are not operational. They're there to provide governance and challenge. And ultimately, a board member from a cybersecurity perspective is to challenge the effectiveness. So a great example, what I say to most board members is, look, understand, go back to your organization, ask them what the scope is. So going back to, in the event of that OPU moment, tell me what it is. Very challenging. Now you understand, or if they present that back to you, tick in the box. If they don't, be concerned, be worried. If they do present it back, or when they present it back, say, right, with regards to vulnerabilities, tell me the mean time to remediation for highs, medium, and criticals. And by the way, every month now, my board pack, I want to see open vulnerabilities and mean time to resolution. Straight away, you're challenging the effectiveness. Instantly, it made an immense amount of difference. So it's just like me challenging you, Simon. You own a particular budget in a particular part of an organization. I'm going to be tracking you against that budget. Are you below? Are you over it? Overspending?
I feel like I'm back in sales again, Jason. Don't do that.
And or you know, you're going to be challenging me on the commission, yeah. But
yeah.
Whatever, that's a separate conversation for another time. But ultimately, you do the same with cyber. So just like I'm going, you know, the board would challenge the P&L and the profit, challenge them on the mean time to detection, the mean time to remediation. Now, the great thing with that approach is you can do that for vulnerability, you can do it for threat intelligence, you can do it for kind of additional threat intelligence to the organization. But you don't need to be a techie. All you're doing is measure the effectiveness, and straight away, you can actually see the ROI on that technology that's been implemented as well.
I'd like to kind of expand on that. So say I'm running the security function. I'm detecting my vulnerabilities. I'm remediating my vulnerabilities, but I could tell that they must be coming from somewhere. Or we're having too many, or engineering is constantly pumping out new stuff. I want to drive change in that department. I want my senior management to say, guys, we are incurring an extra £1 million a year in security spending because of all the issues being generated from, engineering department, IT operations department. How would I go about doing that?
Yeah, I'll give you my view, and kind of it'd be great kind of from David's point of view as well, kind of living down in the weeds as well. So for me, it's really, first of all, so for me, cybersecurity in today's world needs to be, it's traditionally centralized. It's an island of cyber.
Yeah.
It needs to be decentralized. Okay. But in order to decentralize it, basically those other stakeholders, those departments need to be informed that they are accountable and responsible for X and Y. So really, for me, it's really simple. Something called a RACI. So if anyone's ever heard, yeah. So you have a RACI across an organization for different parts of cybersecurity or different domains of cybersecurity. And then you align KPIs and SLAs against that. And then ultimately, you can also align OKRs. Anyone familiar with OKRs?
Yeah.
Across an organization as well. That's how you start forcing that change.
You sound like you're telling companies to turn into normal companies here, Jason, that practice this on a daily basis. No?
Simon, don't start me. I can chat. So what really frustrates me about our industry, it can be very technical, very geeky, very quickly, and really complicated. But actually, if we just step out and just, other industries or other departments solved these problems years ago. We've got races, we've got operating models, we've got KPIs, we've got SLAs. Just apply it. And you'd be surprised what happens.
You know what the problem is, though, Jason? Vendors don't sell them.
Well, sorry, you got a vendor who does. That's what, if you look at technology, sorry.
That's good. I think this is precisely like I want to encourage vendors to provide this extra value that's maybe not to do with the product, but it helps people leverage them and actually accomplish something. And what you just said there is like, that's one of the first reasons when I build a security program, the very first thing is we're going to define a security strategy, which means everyone's going to kind of do their bit and how we're going to approach it. These are maybe our cultural problems. It's always tailored a bit, but there's an executive charter that says, every department, we will have visibility to these things and every department will have these different responsibilities. And I feel like one of the things that security is almost done is by becoming a fairly big thing now, it's almost created the perception of, well, the security stuff, that's their responsibility. It's like, well, it's not actually. And I always ask them, it's like, no, but that's stuff that security people should do. Like the security specialists should be doing that stuff. And I always ask them, okay, which specialist did you hire to lock your front door this morning? And then they realize, oh yeah, we're supposed to be doing this stuff ourselves.
And for me, and kind of, let's get David dragged into this as well. So when I was growing up, I kind of lived, there was a load of woods. I was young. I lived in the woods, not literally, but when I, summer, go up to the woods. And at a young age, I was there trying to light fires, and I'd come back and like really frustrated, hidden a box of matches. And
were you whittling sticks as well, Jason?
Yeah. Got loads of scars as well. But then suddenly I realized, shit, if you have a bit of oxygen, the fuel is, not too thick, and you have some ignition, you can burn woods down literally, and you kind of learned that by mistake. So cybersecurity is no different. So I kind of have this kind of triangle of magic for organizations underpinned by the Rapid7 platform. Is first of all, you measure. Let's just measure what's going on from a risk and a threat perspective. Once you have the measurement, you use that to basically enforce elements of accountability across the organization. So now I have measurement, I have accountability, culture just happens automatically. And literally, it's like that fire, oxygen, ignition, and fuel. That's exactly the same. And people don't talk about this in the cybersecurity industry. So without those three things, you've got nothing.
That's an interesting, that's quite an interesting analogy as a concept. I had two questions left for you guys. The first of all is David was talking about the offering, and I want to kind of give you guys a shot at, tell us, like blatant, shameless plug the offering. The other question is, and I think this is maybe the more important one, any salesperson would disagree with me now, but I think this will actually lead people to go and talk to you guys. One of the things we complain a lot about, I'm impressed, and David, I think you've touched on this a lot. You see many different kinds of customers. They're in different situations, and you seem to take the time to relate to them and understand them and help them. And we take the piss out of vendors on this episode on a regular basis that just have, the FUD, the very aggressive marketing, our silver bullet. Did you know 97% of whatever we happen to do is what causes breaches, and that kind of sales approach. Yours is clearly different. How would you define yours, and why, and what's the value you see in doing it the way you guys do it?
So I guess where we have such a broad portfolio, so we cover.
I like how you've plugged in the offering in the same question. Go ahead, go nuts.
So we have vulnerability management, but that spans across on-premise, on cloud. We have Gaast tooling as well. We've got our own SIEM XDR tool, threat intelligence as well. And basically, if we have one customer who's got one of those tools, the barrier to selling the additional tools, so that the cost of sale is lower. So what we want to do is get customers on a journey with Rapid7, because actually, like, from a business perspective, it lowers the cost of sale for us. But also what that means is, to do that, we have to have good customer service. We have to ensure that these tools are correctly implemented. We can't have a customer going, oh, we put Insight VM in, a year ago, and actually we're not getting any value out of it, because that customer's gone and you've got to spend the same amount to get them back, or get new customers. So the breadth of the portfolio kind of means that we want to be more consultative. We want to understand the business more. So I'll use the example of risk management. If we sell Insight VM for your infrastructure, I also want to know if you have an in-house development team, because then we're doing the next layer in the stack. We've got a Gaast tool that will facilitate that. And actually, when I'm kind of on an engagement, being able to kind of knit a story together with knowing the customer's business processes, knowing actually who's involved on the call, is so much more powerful than just throwing a load of FUD at them, saying, the average cost of a ransomware attack was I don't know if you saw my post today, like my Dr. Evil, like $5.2 million, and it's at that, when you've said stuff like that, you just see like people's eyes glaze over, like, oh, okay.
I saw that post. I was like, oh, that's really out of context and I was like, oh yeah, he's being cynical. Never mind.
I mean, it's in my non-industry expert opinion, the whole selling by fear thing is probably the biggest problem that we've got as an industry. I think if we sell it as business enablement, like it should be, maybe it'd make a bit of a difference.
I think it's unfortunate that there's clearly enough people falling for that stuff to make it sustainable for some vendors. And I think that's really unfortunate. And I think between that and the kind of lack of understanding, the lack of communication skills, I think it's really important. And I feel like you guys are, certainly with what you've said today, you are helping enlighten the end customer. So you're beyond your products, you're giving them value, just knowledge-wise. And that is in turn allowing them to A, build trust with you guys, but B, maximize what they're getting from your products, which then it becomes this kind of feedback loop of, I trust them, what they've given me works, I'm going to get more from them, they're helping me make it work, until you kind of sold your whole portfolio, that anything that's relevant to them. It just seems like an obvious way to do business to me, but there's still so much kind of that aggressive, fuddy marketing.
Yeah. Over the last year, like one of the tool sets that we have is around cloud security, and the difference that you find with that is actually when you're selling it, often it's kind of the senior devs who are really heavily engaged and actually have the final kind of say on things. So talking to developers versus talking to traditional like cybersecurity is very different. And actually what helped me kind of get up to speed on that really quickly was learning like the DevSecOps process, was learning the tools that they use for their job, and then figuring out how our tooling fit into that, because knitting that story together for them, showing them actually like security is no longer the no team, it's the let's give you the tooling, we'll give you the parameters to work in, and then like you can still be fast, you can still push stuff out really quick. So it was learning the story, learning how to knit that all together with their processes, and that was far more compelling than telling them they're going to get breached.
I want to just jump in real quickly to ask you a quick question before Jason takes over. I have this theory that if you educate customers about, if you're honest about, what your product can do, but also what the limitations are and why that is, by kind of giving them that knowledge, that understanding, your competitor who is maybe pushing the FUD, he's going to be a lot less successful in the future. So you're kind of giving yourself that edge over your maybe not as straight competitor, but you're also helping improve the space, because the more customers you enlighten, even if they don't go with you forevermore in the future, every time a solution provider they will have some basic understanding where they can kind of like fact check. It's kind of like, I know a little bit about cars, so I'm not going to get ripped off by a shady mechanic type of deal. What are your quick thoughts on that?
It's about trust, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll use a very strange example of that, but like I
it's not ex-girlfriend related, is it, David?
We have strict rules. No one told us.
Unfortunately not. So I was in Bulgaria last year, and I was meeting partners for the first time, and we spent this was an hour-long meeting, and we spent 45 minutes, and it was just chit-chat. And I come out of the meeting, I said to our account exec, and I was like, why didn't they want to talk about the product? And he said, they trust you now. Now you can talk about the product. So it's a big trust thing. It's understanding the people you're dealing with rather than the technology itself. And then you'll know when that person's giving you an answer, it can or cannot do something, that the trust is there, you feel safe with them. And obviously, like, security is about safety, right?
Yeah.
Just want to
hopefully I've answered your question. I realise I went off a bit on a tangent.
Yeah, just following up on David, I'm sure there's a lot of salespeople, and even David's seen this. We've gone into meetings with potential customers, and essentially, they've just unfortunately come out of a breach. So suddenly there's an amount of money kicking around, and they want to buy everything. And very often I will say, look, okay, let's just step through this a second. But as an organization, if you were to purchase all of this technology now, can you consume it and maximize it within 12 months? And people, again, as a vendor, I think that's unique. But for me, for Rapid7, it's about the annual recurring revenue. I want to keep that customer forever. So if I can basically be very honest and say, look, right now you need this. Once you've got that working, maximized, then we go here, here, and here. And we do that over time. Because I don't want a customer, and I'm sure David don't, and I know all my team don't, to basically place a PO, configure it, or have shelfware and not being consuming it. So we've got to take that customer on that journey relative to them as an organization. And then finally, I just want to pick up on why I joined Rapid7. So I was engaged with Rapid7 for an engagement period pre kind of accepting the job role. And the culture and their belief is like nothing I've ever seen in any other organization. And that's committed by our open source community and giving back. So we have this phenomenal platform which can go from the very low technical all the way up to the business requirements and everything mapped together and kind of bake it into the business process. But what we do for the community and give back is like nothing I've ever seen. So for everyone who's listening, if you've ever heard of Metasploit, that's Rapid7. Attacker KP, that is Rapid7. Velociraptor, that is Rapid7. Sonar, that is Rapid7. Project Heisenberg, that's Rapid7. So I can go on, and these are freely available tools for the community and for the world to use. And
do you, Jason, do you have a list anywhere of those free tools that I could grab off you after this?
Yeah, we can send a
Yeah.
link. But these are open source tools based on threat intelligence, attacker KB. You may have a vulnerability, but what's the context? Is it actually being exploited in the wild? It tells you, So
isn't that the whole CVS score and another hour debate?
Yeah, we're a CVS authority. We're part of the disclosure and the applying CVS scoring. But for me, that's why I love this industry. It's to give back, and it's really to make organizations secure in the most simplest way possible without all the complexities.
Amazing. Thank you, Jason. Greg, any final words, and you, David, as well? Anything you want to say before we wrap things up?
I just want to say, I mean, I'm just going to ask as a rhetorical question. I'm assuming your customer retention is quite good. Honestly, like, this is completely unscripted, and this has been really, really refreshing.
Yeah.
I've not used Rapid7 in 10 years. It definitely feels like a different company now. You guys make me want to check out the whole portfolio now, even though I don't get to practice anymore because no one wants to hire me. But I think I just feel like this is what I want vendors to be. This is what I want vendors to be, and I was kind of like hoping, to discuss about these issues and, maybe even make some contribution to you guys about,
but you weren't expecting them to be more prepared, were you?
Honestly, we haven't scripted this.
Oh,
I gave it for 2 minutes, and I said, "So what are we talking about?"
I talk about business process all the time, and you were literally the first, kind of C-level CIO, CTO, CISO that I hear that talks about business process.
Yeah.
So yeah, really enjoyable. Kudos.
It's been awesome. Thank you, guys. David, any words of wisdom, not about your ex-girlfriends, before we wrap up?
No, I'm just, thanks for having us on. And it's been an absolute pleasure for me.
No, likewise. I mean, it's been, I put in the private chat a little while ago. I mean, I'm no expert in cybersecurity, but I've learned absolutely stacks today. And I'm really appreciative for all three of your time, giving it up for myself and the community. I'll get this promoted a bit wider through the leadership network that we've got as well, to get this in front of some CISOs for you, because I think, if there's other people like Greg out there who haven't used Rapid7 for 10 years, it's quite important they hear the work you're doing at the moment. And I'm happy to support that moving forward. So again, thank you so much for coming on. Audience, as ever, thank you very much for your engagement. It's much appreciated. I'll be streaming live from RSA next week on Monday. I'll add the date and time on the YouTube channel probably over the weekend. I've got 2 or 3 live streams coming in. I'm going to do some harassing people on the street with my camera streams as well. So let's see if I get punched while I'm in San Francisco next week. But in the meantime, have a great evening, everyone, and we'll catch you very soon. Thank you.
And definitely.
Sorry, Greg, you were saying something there.
They're asking if they can connect with us on LinkedIn. I said definitely connect with us on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you very much. See you all later, guys.